The issues that we actually have faced. With inflation, interest rate issues have also happened. Now I remember while I was helping Mangala Samaravira, the former finance minister, in that 2.5-year period, we also had a program with the International Monetary Fund. And the basis of the program was fiscal consolidation based on revenue. We went about it. We collected revenue from GDP as a percentage of GDP. It went up from about 10% to nearly 13% in a 2.5-year period. Obviously, taxes had to go up because we are collecting revenue, but also we were able to increase the tax net. The files went up, almost doubled, from 700,000, the tax files doubled. Not very popular measures, but clearly important measures, given that revenues had collapsed over a period of time. In the late 1980s, Sri Lanka's revenues as a percentage of GDP was about 22%. And now suddenly it has really died and it has collapsed. The responsibility of a government is really to manage the macro economy. I say it's not to manage industry or particular sectors. It's a macro economy. That's our primary responsibility. To have low inflation, low interest rates, a stable exchange rate, and create stability. I come from the private sector myself and from civil society, and I've been on that side of the divide, and I know that the people who are actually running businesses, driving exports, and are internationally integrated into global supply chains, they know exactly what needs to be done. Politicians don't know, and they don't need to know as long as they don't interfere. So therefore, our responsibility is actually creating a stable macroeconomic environment so that businesses could thrive and exports could increase and get us out of this mess. So we had the foreign currency debt as well. The foreign currency debt repayments obviously ran into a huge problem. And now the question is, how do we actually come out of this? So this is the background that we are in, and I'm not going to talk more about the present situation. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is not to be frowned at. You go to a bank when you need the bank's money, when you need its endorsement. If you are going basically to quote your company on the stock exchange, you obviously need to get a good audit report so that people have confidence. Countries that go to the International Monetary Fund go there because they have mismanaged their economies. And therefore, a program with the International Monetary Fund is absolutely essential. And therefore, this present program with the International Monetary Fund must continue. And the overall pillars are agreed on. But what we have to do, and when we are talking about changes, what we are talking about is some of the changes that are affecting the people which we will have to really renegotiate. Sometimes there's confusion on that. There is economic stability that is needed, but there is also social stability that is needed. Countries can never advance economically unless there is social stability too. And this is something that governments have to understand and government has to work with. So on one hand, people go around saying, what a great job has been done recently with stabilizing the macro economy. I don't contend with that issue because the box can be ticked in terms of certain ratios that have been achieved, and that is necessary. But I'm concerned about the social instability it's creating. 3 million people below the poverty line, gone up to 7 million people. I walk the streets every Sunday for 3 hours going to door. Many politicians can't walk the streets, going door to door. That's how difficult the situation in the country is. About a month ago, I was walking door to door. I stepped over into a little house, and the woman came up to me and she said, "Mama polla koyanne." I said, "Hey, amme, ehema kale wata gahanna." This is the true story. I realized the tension that she was under. She took me to the kitchen. She showed me that they had only rice and some pulsa oil that day. She showed me the roof, and it was leaking. And if you go on the New Gold Road in Moratua, seaside is one side, the other is land. And when the system was done, even the highway was built there, they didn't really took care of how the water, after rain, was going to go. It goes and floods that area. I understood. I looked at the little 3 children who were sitting there. I went up to the 3 children and I asked the lady, "Who are the parents of these children?" And she said, "The mother and the father are both in the Valikara prisons." She said, "I'm the grandmother." That's the tension that was there. I went to the Valikara prison and the officials were very glad to see me. I walked in there. I spent more than 2 hours. They took me to the women's section. They said, "Go and look at what's happening there." And in a small area, women were sleeping like this next to each other. And I looked at it, all young women in there. They were on drug offences or financial offences. Most of those people should have not been in prison. The drug users, they should have been in rehabilitation centers. But this country doesn't even have sufficient rehabilitation centers to house those women. 10 children under 1 year were held by the mothers like that. There are 15 children between the ages of 1 and 5 there. Not even a toy to play. If one gets sick, everybody gets sick. The prison officials told me, "Can you somehow build us 10 cells?" I don't like cells. I asked them why. They said if one person gets sick, everybody gets sick. That's why we need it. And the reason I am telling you this anecdotal story is macro financial stability is needed, but no country is going to advance unless it can create social stability. The economy doesn't work in isolation. The economy works with social stability. There are countries who have had stronger economies than us, but because politicians and societal leaders were not sensitive to the social stability, suddenly they have erupted. Bangladesh is our latest example. Economy is doing better than us. And that is why I'm saying we are operating in this environment. If somebody comes and tries to say that we are going to get out of this very easily, I don't share that view. I don't share that view. We have to be on the right road, but we have to balance this. So the SJB's philosophy is this. We believe in a social democracy. Democracy for sure. That's our way of life. We believe that the means is as important as the end. There are some political parties who are running in this race. They believe in the end and they have a good end, like we have a good end. But sometimes they don't believe in the means. They only believe in the end. And sometimes that could be fatal, because if you have that philosophy of life. The Samagi Chala Bala Vekya is committed. Our philosophy is committed. The social democratic party. We want democracy at the bottom. That is why we have even committed to the fundamental principles of devolution, where some decisions are made where people are. We are committed to these principles. That's our philosophy. When it comes to the economy, we certainly believe in the private sector. We believe in free enterprise. We believe that that's where wealth is created. That's where jobs are created. I was shocked yesterday when one of the other parties running in this had such an event like this yesterday. They gave a 50-page document, which I had to quickly glance through. And in the introduction of the document, in their analysis, they said, this country is in this particular position because the state or the government has not sufficiently intervened in the economy. I need to make it clear our philosophy is different. Our philosophy is the reverse. My heavens, I don't want to see a lot more government intervention. We have hundreds of state-owned enterprises. Most of these state-owned enterprises have been mismanaged. Assets have been misused. They have really not created wealth and not really created jobs. Our philosophy is different. So we believe in free enterprise. We believe in strengthening the private sector. Not just big businesses only, but even the small and medium businesses need to be strengthened because they are the ones who create wealth and create jobs in this country. But why are we a social market economy? Because we want to have inclusive and equitable growth. That is why SJB talks about a social market economy. This is our philosophy. So there's a huge cost. And the cost is also corruption is a huge cost. We need to do lots of changes with that. One of the things that surprised me, because I was involved in the earlier IMF program in the last government, and it was revenue-based consolidation. But then, when they went into the next program, I was surprised that the program was negotiated on the basis, again, of a revenue-based consolidation, and there was no reference to cost, wastage, corruption in the public services of the country. And I was really, really amazed at it. If you are trying to put a company right, you can't only look at the revenue side, you have to look at the cost side. Everybody seated here, you run a business or work in a business, you invest, you know what I'm talking about. It's no difference for the country. You can't ignore that. You have to actually, so the program should have actually had that component, but this program doesn't have that component. We need to be integrated with the world. We know that the world has changed. When I was growing up, the United States was the center and people gravitated there. The USSR was the other center and people gravitated there. That was the years, followed with the years of the Cold War. And that's how the world was divided. In one generation, it has changed. We are now talking more about the geopolitics of India and China. We are talking about the rise of Asia. We are talking about Indian growth. 7% last year, 7.5% GDP growth this year. That's how fast the economies in Asia are growing. We are just 22 million people. Very small market. We definitely need to be integrated with the rest of the world. We have to break away from our mindset of somehow or other posturing ourselves and thinking we can do it on our own. I know I have so many friends in the business community and I talk with them at a philosophical level, they do agree with me. But then when I get into the individual conversation, I also hear some come and tell me, but Iran, we have to somehow to protect our industry. I want you to really think through that very carefully. Obviously, we want our businesses to succeed. We are doing all this to raise the living standards of our people in our country. But I'm saying, we've come this route for a long time. We need to look at it afresh. If we are going to integrate with the rest of the world, we want to open up and open our borders. So, if I give you just one quick example, tourism has been a seasonal business. It's a seasonal business, November, December, January, February. Why? Because it started with attracting European and American tourists who came here for their winters. That we should leave behind. Asia is growing. Why can't we be a 365-day tourist destination? We have our traditional tourism. Our traditional tourism is to do with our ancient cities, our history, our beaches, the sun, wildlife. But what about urban tourism? What about making this a convention center? India is growing so fast. Lots of things we are learning which we don't know. the middle class in India is equal to the whole of Europe. This is how the world has changed. 5 million tourists. When I was in office as State Minister of Finance, the highest number of tourists we had was about 2.3 million. Getting 5 million tourists, if we open our minds, is not a big issue. 2 million can come just from the Indian subcontinent and 3 million from elsewhere. We must break through this. These are low-hanging fruits. Will also help us with our foreign research issues. This is the kind of mindset change. Our foreign policy of Samagijana Balavegia, we are an independent country, but we are a small island next to the Indian subcontinent. Our foreign policy will never threaten India's defense in any way, but our foreign policy is such that we will invite investment from any source if investment comes. We want to make sure that we have an open platform, a transparent platform, so that investors could come from anywhere and work with our businesses. That is our foreign policy. Economic diplomacy will take center stage in our foreign policy. That's what our diplomats should be doing. The Lakshman Khadiragam principle, 75% of diplomats will be professionals in the foreign service. Others who are going to be appointed have to also be professionals. No family member of any politician will be appointed into those foreign policy positions. No way. That's the change. That's the change that we want to see happen in Sri Lanka. We need to change this. We need to change this. I know my introduction is a little long, but I want to say this. Because when people come and ask me, Iran, what's the biggest problem in this country? I never say it's the economy. This is so small, it can be put right. The biggest problem I say in this country is the rule of law. That is the biggest issue. If the rule of law is working and every citizen feels that they are equal, the law applies equally, that they have dignity, we can fix the economy. Even foreign investors, direct foreign investors in particular, will have confidence because they know that the law actually works. And this is something that we have to deeply think about. We have to establish the rule of law. We can't take it lightly at all. We have a situation in which, the President of the country has been accused by the Supreme Court of the country. I'm not making a political statement here. I'm just making a statement is that because I believe strongly in the rule of law and a just society, the Supreme Court of the country, the judicial system must be independent from the legislature. The legislature must be independent from the executive. All three arms of government must be independent of each other, check and balance on each other and work perfectly. But the Supreme Court says that the President has violated the constitution of the country recently in 2 separate judgments. Sri Lankans' rule of law is the critical thing. Everybody, from the President to the man on the street, the rule of law must apply equally. Samagijana Balavegia. We don't want to go the old route. We are going a new road. Some people look at us, and the other day Harsha and I were laughing at each other, and they feel like, you all have all been in power, and how can you say you're a new party and you're going on a new journey? And we were telling ourselves, Harsha and I have never served in a cabinet of this country. But people look at us and think that we have, and that we are senior politicians. And the reason I said that example is, it's a new road, it's a new journey. Samagijana Bala is new. We may have come from different political backgrounds and political parties, and from different experiences, but we are going on a new road and a new way. We have been working on this over a period of time. We have 27 groups over a 2-year period. We worked on policy for all these 27 areas. Which was this? Okay, these are the 27 areas. And just to give you a very, very quick run. It's more than 600 pages. The policy document is more than 600 pages. We had professionals. Rajiv is sitting here. He coordinated this. We had professionals. We had academics, all working together over more than a 2-year period. It's they who basically came up with all these policy areas. That's why I said it's a long policy document. But a lot of work has been done. The manifesto is only a small reflection of the work that has been done. And then in terms of transparency, these are the things that we are intending to do. We have a law called the CBOC law, but we are going to strengthen it further because we want to see changes. I was glad that I was able to, a year ago, bring a private member's motion bill to Parliament saying all politicians and high officials should make public asset declarations. In this election, there's a lot of talk about asset declarations that have started. And I was glad that the government accepted it, and that's working. We're going to create an independent public prosecutor's office. At the moment, presently, the government's lawyer is the Attorney General's department. There's clearly a conflict of interest. This is my lawyer one day, I rob and steal the next day, and he's supposed to put a case against me. It just does not happen. We've studied the model in Hong Kong, we've been there, I've been there a couple of times, looked at it very closely, and we want to create that. Once cases are put, presently the law is the sole discretion, even to withdraw a case, is with the Attorney General. That's a conflict of interest. We want to do away with it. We want to make sure that it's independent and people will be prosecuted and held responsible. Public procurement is another huge area in transparency. You know that you may have been a victim of that. Public procurement. No transparency. We want to create a public procurement platform and make sure that e-procurement is moved, all public procurement. We want to make sure the transactions will be publicized and also information will be made available. A public procurement law will be passed with global best practices to ensure that all public procurement will be covered by the new law. Then the other thing we will do in tackling corruption is bring a law for stolen assets recovery. This law is already drafted. Like I said about the assets and liabilities, making it public, that there was a private member's law. We have presented a private member's law already in Parliament on stolen assets recovery. So if there is obviously a change of government and we are in office, then it becomes a part of our government law. We will bring it in. We want to trace, seize and confiscate these assets. The Parliamentary Budget Office has been approved by Parliament, but it's still to be set up properly, and it will be set up soon. The idea of the Parliamentary Budget Office is manifold. Everything that is presented in Parliament by government, even the budget, is independently analysed there. In some countries, the Parliamentary Budget Office has gone even further. In an election, when you present your manifesto, they look at the manifesto and say, can this be done? What is the feasibility, or it can't be done? In advanced countries, it's got to the point that people don't believe your manifesto. They actually believe the report that's coming from the Parliamentary Budget Office. It will take a time to actually set it up, and when it is being set up, and I have said this to the Speaker of the present House, when we are setting this up, I said we need private sector people involved in it. Because the skill sets are different, particularly in budget management, which to a large extent lacks in the public sector. Not because public officials are foolish, but public officials are often dealing with expenditure. They are not dealing with revenue and expenditure. Only a few arms deal with revenue, all are dealing with expenditure. So when we are setting it up, we need private sector participation and private sector skills in actually doing it. Then we have a central revenue authority which we want to create. Most of the country's revenue comes from three institutions: Inland Revenue, Customs and Excise. If you have dealt with them, I don't need to tell you more. I worked with all of them for 2.5 years. Nobody accused me or my minister that we took a dollar. But the level of corruption in these institutions, businessmen continue to come and complain about. My point is this: let's get out of the mindset that we are going to look at individuals. We need systems change, and we need to put systems in place. It doesn't matter who sits on the chair today, but we need a systems change. That's what we need. And to have the systems change, we need to change that. A good leader is measured not when he's in office, but once he has left office. If the good things he has put in place continue, then we all know we've had a great leader. That is why we are after systems change. So, these central revenue collection authorities, let's say you have to import, you go to the bank, you open your LC, it comes, you now go to customs, you go to clear it, and then they look at the HS code, and then discussions happen. This is what most businessmen come and say. What are we doing here? We are going to remove the interaction. We want to get rid of the interaction, remove the interaction. The message goes, once the goods have arrived into the central authority takes the customer, you pay there, message goes there, goods are cleared. I'm giving you one quick example. This is not, something amazing. Countries have actually done this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to keep implementing it. So this is the direction that we are going to go in creating a central revenue authority. Then the public sector. We want to basically digitize this. We started this in 2003-04. We created the East Sri Lanka program. The pillars were information infrastructure, regenerating government, ICT policy, leadership development, local language initiative, monitoring and so forth. The three components the DPA should have here is everybody will have a unique identification number. That's something that we are going to move into. The ability to transfer value, interoperability will have to be a part of that system. And then, of course, very conscious about privacy. We will maintain privacy, and we will not do things without the consent of the individual. Many benefits, as you can see, in moving there. And finally, I would like to talk about the public sector management itself, because this is another key issue that many people keep talking about. We know that we had 700,000 public servants. In a 20-year period, it has doubled. And therefore, numbers is one issue, and how do we deal with the numbers? Obviously, we have to deal with it over time. We can't create more social instability. Recognition of the problem, and then how do you actually deal with the problem? We have ideas how we will do it. I don't blame a single public servant for the mess that is in the public service. It is politicians who are responsible, because they recruited people for political gain and ruined Sri Lanka's public service. So public servants are not to blame with. So when we deal with it, we have to deal with the issue in a very fair manner. And then there are overlapping roles here. Right? There's redundancy, underpayment, right? The best brains go there but they leave after a while. So there's numbers issue, political interference and so forth. So we have to deal with it. One of the things we are going to do, start at the top. And we have now said this publicly and put it in our manifesto. We are going to restrict the cabinet of the country. In the constitution, there's a little loophole that politicians have slipped in. If you form a national government, you can have any amount of ministers. Sajid Premadasa has decided to do away with that clause in the cabinet. Just completely do away with it. so that you can't be expanding ministers as you want, looking at faces and deciding whether to include them. He has given that commitment. If we set the example at the top and look at rationalizing, I think then we can change the public sector also, because we are changing it at the top. So we are going to look at that. So we restrict the cabinet ministers, independent public service. It's a long-term goal, because independence was locked with the Republican Constitution. We will certainly look at that. We will strengthen the regulatory bodies, and we look at consumer protection as well, and then planning and planned implementation will be born. I would like to just expand on that point. Presently, how the system works is this. I'm the president of the country, and I'm thinking that I want an airport, I want a highway to my city or whatever. I take a cabinet paper, go to the cabinet, I get it approved, and then they start on the work, and the Ministry of Finance has to go and negotiate and get the resources. This is how it actually works. Lots of capital expenditure projects in this country have had no project evaluation. No project evaluation. I remember as Deputy Minister, with Kabir Hashim was the Minister, and Kabir and I was objecting to the building of a particular highway. You know what happened? I was sidelined, and Kabir was sidelined. I was invited only when the foundation stone was being laid. That's how Sri Lanka works. I was very clear that the highway shouldn't have been built, because there is no return. This country is in this situation because we undertook projects without proper project evaluation. That is why we are bringing a Ministry of Planning and Plan Implementation. Capital expenditures will be decided only after they are independently vetted and approved by professionals. It's only then that it will be sent to the cabinet. I think we need to stop this nonsense that has gone on for too long. This is why I'm saying we are on a new path and a new road. Just because it's somebody's project, building a highway, building a port, building a airport. When I went to object to it once, I got threatened when I went to object to it. A man came with a pistol in his hand, a gun in his hand, and we escaped that day. Ajit Pereira, the former MP, is here, the attorney at law. Ajit was with me when that incident actually happened. We need to get out of that. Capital expenditures, plan and plan implementation is absolutely important. We recognize it, and we are going to institute it. KPIs are needed in the public sector. We are going to hire mid-career professionals. We can't change it only by having people coming. We need to have people sitting in this audience in the system. Because if your skill sets are not in the system, you play an important role in the private sector. We really appreciate it. You play an important role in civil society. But some of you and some of your skills are needed within the system. I took a personal decision to give up my career and go into this. Because one day somebody I was advising a minister, I was head of the bank advising him. He looked at me and he said to me, Iran, you haven't understood something. I said, what haven't I understood? He said, you haven't understood that the system works for those in it. That's the day I went home. And my mind opened. I head of the bank, I go in the evening to cocktail parties. I know everything that's wrong, I discuss everything that's wrong. But he opened my mind and he said, unless some of you are in the system, it's going to be very difficult to bring change. So we need to allow mid-career professionals to come into this. We must invest heavily in training, which we don't. And then I won't go into other details, I will conclude there. The state-owned enterprises, we are going for the Temasek model. In state-owned enterprises, some work was done in the earlier period. The present government has done a lot of work. We are going to continue. We are not going to start afresh. We are going to just take it forward, and we will look at the things that we can absorb and any changes that are needed. And the idea, the important thing there is management of the public sector companies. Some could completely be closed down, some could be moved to the private sector, some could be joint public-private partnerships. But a very important thing is when you create the model, I use the word Temasek or Kazan, I will use the model. One important thing is, the minister does not decide on the appointment of the directors. We have to get out of that model. That model has gone on for too long. I go in there, several institutions are brought under me, and I decide and put it. That's why you hear that friends and relations are being put. When we get into the Temasek model, we get out of that. We only appoint the Temasek board, and after that, the professionals just take over. They work to bring a return. And who are the shareholders? The citizens of the country. That is why we want to go that route. And I repeat again, whatever progressive things that the present government has done, we are not going to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to take it forward from there. Thank you again for your patient listening.